The Defence Strategic Review released yesterday. I want to get some analysis from a regular on our program and someone who watches this area closer than most. He's the foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, what's your overall assessment of the Albanese government's response here? And, well, first of all, the recommendations, they've accepted all of them, at least to some degree. What's your assessment?
Well, Kieran, I want to give the government a kind of a B- or a C+ or something. They're as good as the last government. Certainly, they're going to maintain spending. The direction they're going is the right direction. We're moving into the age of missiles, and they want the army to get rid of some of its heavy armour, although they've ludicrously kept the tanks. God knows how the army convinces Defence Minister after Defence Minister to keep tanks. But every word in the review you could agree with, every word. But having said all that, there's also a sense of anti-climax. I mean, did we really have to have this long inquiry in order to announce another inquiry about our surface fleet? So we all know that we've got to stop producing offshore patrol vessels, which have no weapons and no armour on their skin, and produce mini frigate corvettes, which you can load up with missiles, and they're deadly ships. We all know the Hunter frigate is just doesn't have enough missiles on its deck to be competitive in a modern combat circumstance. So you've probably got to build air warfare destroyers and maybe reconfigure the Hunters a bit. That's not really rocket science. And, I just can't understand why we haven't done that already. And then there's also the missing squadron. We thought we were going to get an extra squadron of Joint Strike Fighters, F-35s. We've got about 100 fast jets now. We always have 100 fast jets. And Defence has this sort of deep capacity to stop any government from ever changing it. So an extra squadron of F-35s now would be an increase in our capability. But in fact, it looks as though there are no plans for that extra squadron. So on the one hand, the strategic assessment is situation has never been more desperate. On the other hand, not much is happening, and it's not happening fast.
One of the changes, both in terms of the strategy and then the prescription about trying to prevent or divert any potential adversary to our north, and then therefore to bolster our bases in the north of our nation. When I was reading all of that, was surprised that hasn't been a bigger priority much sooner than what we're talking about in 2023.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kieran, and that's why I became very, very disillusioned and critical with the last coalition government, because they were in office for 10 years and they did bugger all about bugger all. But hardening the bases is unglamorous, but it requires quite a lot of effort. I mean, you might have to store some of your planes in hardened facilities, and you have to provide some kind of missile defence for the bases, or they're not really military bases. They're just parking stations, which Chinese missiles could destroy all the assets of on the first day of any conflict. So the government has set an intent here, but it hasn't told us what it's going to do or when or how quickly. So hardening the bases can mean everything from just adding a bit more concrete to really making it a protected, missile-defended facility from which you could wage actual combat. Similarly, it's good that the army is now going to be able to fire missiles instead of 40 kilometres out to 500 kilometres. But 500 kilometres is not a strategic distance either. We need missiles and planes and ships and so on with a range of thousands of kilometres. If we're going to hold anyone at bay a long way from our shore, you've got to have missiles with a much bigger range than 500 kilometres. And we've got some of those. We're going to put Tomahawks on the air warfare destroyers, but we've only got 3 air warfare destroyers. We've only really got 3 serious combat ships in our entire Navy. Now, the government knows all this. They know it all better than I know it. But what I can't understand is why they're not doing the obvious things. And I suspect that underneath it all, Defence has just won again. Somehow or other, this inertia. Defence thinks the Americans will always look after us. Better if an Australian government doesn't have a warfighting capability. And real men have tanks, and we've got our defence acquisition program, and it takes 1 million years, and there it is. Don't care whether Anthony Albanese or Scott Morrison is Prime Minister. You're going to do as you're told, government.
Now, one of the points you made is that we've had this review, and then there is a subsequent review into the surface fleet in the Navy. The other thing that's changed is that gone are the days of the Defence White Paper, Greg. This is going to be a national defence strategy with every 2 years an update. Does that make sense to you?
Well, Kieran, I think it's a matter of sublime irrelevance. There was some medieval city that was conquered, and the senators, it may have been Rome, the senators were debating how many angels could dance on the head of a pin when the invading barbarians came through. I mean, this country is super expert at producing white papers, and no doubt it will become super expert at producing biennial defence strategies. I can save the government a lot of money. I can write them all for it now if it likes for the next 20 years. But that's of no consequence. I don't want white papers or strategies. I want ships and missiles and guns and, capability. I want 2,000 kilometre range missiles in large numbers spread all around northern Australia. I want another 25 or 50 or 100 joint strike fighters with in-air refueled tankers that means they can go out 1,000 kilometres and then fire missiles 2,000 kilometres after that. If we are ever in a war where the key question is how good are you at writing defence strategies, we will win hands down. If we are in a war where the key question is the missile going to hit the target, we're in a lot of trouble.
Greg Sheridan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran.